Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Last First Date Radio, featuring interviews with experts in dating, relating, and mating in midlife. And now, here's your host, Sandy Weiner.
Hello, everybody. This is Sandy, and welcome to Last First Date Radio, the place to be for creating healthy, lasting relationships in midlife. And today, I'm excited to be speaking with physician, attorney, and author Lynn Marie Morski about why confronting your fears is the most critical stage of a breakup. We get a lot of emails and questions about breakups all the time because it's one of the most difficult things that people go through. So I am really excited to be speaking with Lynn Marie. And before I bring her on, I just want to say that I have loved being a love coach for the past 11 years. This is work that has not only changed so many lives and brought love to people who have really never experienced it, sometimes really for the first time in their lives, in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. And really the first step in finding love is loving yourself. It's finding your own value and knowing what your boundaries are around the standards that you set for yourself and for others, and to do it with grace, to do it as a woman, not harshly, but really knowing those boundaries, knowing who can cross them, nobody. So when you are a woman of value, you really attract in love like a man magnet, and this is something that I absolutely love doing. And I am now expanding the Woman of Value movement to the workplace. And in fact, I'm starting next week with a big pharmaceutical company with a series of lunch and learns on how to find your value at work and communicate boldly and with empowerment. And so I'm super excited about that. And every week I bring you a tip on how to become a woman of value. And this week's tip is be a lifetime learner. I went on a date yesterday with somebody, and one of the things that really attracted me to him was that he said he's always learning and growing. And that is really a must-have for me, because when you are a lifetime learner, you become interested in so many things, and you then become more interesting. So we never should give up learning. I just feel like there's so much out there for us to grow and learn from, and everything in life can be turned into a lesson, something that we can really grow with. And I'll be bringing on Lynn Marie in 1 minute, but I also wanted to quickly tell you that if you're not yet a member of the Woman of Value Club, what are you doing not being a member? This is like the most amazing club that I started a few months ago. This is actually month number 2, and it's a membership club, very, very low membership rate, and right now you can get a trial membership for free for the first month. It is, we have one topic call every single month for an hour on a video conferencing line, and this month's topic is how to understand and communicate with men over 40. I find that most issues in relationships come from misunderstandings, and women need to understand that men are not just hairy women, as Alison Armstrong says, but they are really different from us. And when we really understand that, we can connect with them much more deeply. So to join and find out more about the Woman of Value Club, go to lastfirstdate.com, my website, and click on the group coaching tab, and you will be brought to the Woman of Value Club page, and you can join from there. The club topic meeting is this Monday night, December 11th. So join today and be part of that call. And now I am going to bring on our guest, Lynn Marie Morski. She is a doctor, a speaker, an attorney, an author. She has a lot of things, and she's also a lifelong quitter. She's the founder of Quitting by Design, and she is on a mission to help people carve out a successful life through strategic quitting. I actually love that, and I can't wait to hear more. And since her first big quit at the age of 21, she discovered the power of quitting to inform your life's true purpose and path. And she has a new book, Quitting by Design, which teaches readers how to maximize the benefits and minimize the challenges associated with major life changes. So join me now for episode number 335, Why Confronting Your Fears is the Most Critical Stage of a Breakup. Welcome to the show, Lynn Marie.
Thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure. So first question I have is, what was that first big quit at the age of 21?
That would be when I quit my job as a multimedia designer and decided to go to medical school to become a sports medicine doctor, because I thought I knew what I wanted with my career trajectory. And I mean, that was all through grade school, high school. I was going to be a broadcast journalist. And it took some slight twists and turns in college. I ended up being a multimedia designer from the video editing world. It was all just like slight pivots to that point, but then I made just a massive quit and said, I'm going to leave multimedia completely and go into medicine.
And how long did that second part of your life journey last?
Well, it took a decade to get to become a sports medicine doctor, because I had done nothing resembling science in my very, very liberal arts undergrad. So I had to do pre-med, med school, residency, fellowship. And then I got to the end of that and realized, I don't love this either. And so I had to strategically put the parts of medicine that were the most troublesome for me, and then thereby carving out a practice type that only focused on the parts that did work for me. And from then I went on to law school, and I've done the same thing over and over, just made little shifts and quits along the way to carve out the path that works best for my values in life.
I love that. I like the shifts and quits. And I think most people, actually this was a conversation I had on my date yesterday, was he started out as an economist and then a pharmacist, and now he sells commercial real estate. And he said he was like the rule follower. He did everything his parents told him to do, and then one day he said, I'm going to break every rule. This is not working for me. And I'm like, I like this guy.
If we could quit society's expectations and parental expectations, so many other quits don't have to happen. But so many of us have followed those paths, and then there's a lot of quits that result from living somebody else's truth for a long time.
Yeah, and that's what gets us into the wrong relationships as well, is that we, I remember even one guy I dated ended up in the wrong marriage because he was set up on his second marriage with this woman, and he felt, well, because these people who set him up know him so well, then she must be so wonderful. So he kind of totally put his intuition to sleep and married the wrong woman and had a kid with her. And I think a lot of times people think that, like, oh, they set me up, they must think we're a great match. So even if I don't feel it, maybe I should just try and make it work.
Wow.
So, do you have any theories about, like, why people get into the wrong relationships? The pre-quit, like what happens here?
Yes. I think it all boils down to settling, and people settle for different reasons. I think a lot of people who get into these relationships, there's probably some, like you said, some little piece of intuition that says this person isn't Mr. or Ms. right for you, or Mr. Forever for you, but they may feel like if they want kids, they may feel like, oh, I'm running out of time. Or it may be an issue of loneliness, like, okay, this person isn't amazing, but I'm so tired of being alone. Or it may be, it could be something, we don't like to talk about this, but it could be something as kind of basic as a financial need. Like, it is definitely harder to live on your own than it is to split rent. And so if somebody comes along, they're not ideal, but they want to live with you and they can split rent. Let's just be honest. I mean, if you're asking why do people make these decisions, they may not think about it consciously, but somewhere in their subconscious, a lot of these factors might be swirling around that lead them to settle for these less than ideal partners.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think especially the people who are in their 60s and 70s who had married young and married for all the wrong reasons. Often it was parental, pressure, or their ovaries were drying up in them. I mean, that's what I thought when I was 28. Yeah. I thought my ovaries were drying up. Right now I look back, I'm like, no, they were far from drying up. But it's making a decision where your intuition tells you something really strongly, and you go, nah, that can't be right. I'll just push that aside. I'll just bury that under the rug. And that's where we make the worst decisions.
Yes, absolutely. And
so,
I think that's my mission to spread. I think there's a delay in our phone call somehow, but the mission I have, I feel like I need to share it because my body does not let me ignore my intuition. It will fight me in very, very physical or mental ways that are not subtle. So if I'm in a relationship that's totally wrong, I'll have backache. I will get irritable. Like, it is not something that I can push under the rug. And what I'm guessing is that other people have lower levels of those symptoms, but they are able to push them under the rug, or they just suffer through them and they don't realize, oh, these are symptoms that my intuition is yelling at me that this relationship isn't right. So my goal is to educate people on what those symptoms might be so that they're not going to their doctor like, oh, I've got acid reflux, I've got chronic pain. No, you have a chronically bad relationship that's causing distress that's leading to these other things. And so I'm hoping to elucidate that for people.
Yeah, I think that it's such an important thing. Our body really doesn't lie. And so many times people miss, why do I have backache? Why do I have these chronic issues? And they're not dealing with the internal stuff and, just kind of closing their eyes. And it's like the woman who just hired me, she said she saw this guy's car and knew the first time she saw his car, like, this is a relationship that will never work. The guy was like a hoarder. He had no money. His car was a complete mess, and she just ignored it, and it's like, comes back to bite you. It comes back to bite you big time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So this is how we get into the wrong relationships, and so it's important to quit a relationship that's not working. And you make a distinguish between quitting and giving up. What is the difference?
Quitting and strategic quitting, which is specifically what I talk about, is a thoroughly thought out and planned process. Giving up is generally like, oh, the going gets hard, I'm out. Giving up in a relationship setting is like, oh, we've had one argument, I just walk out of the relationship. That argument wasn't comfortable, I'm done. Strategically quitting a relationship is realizing, okay, there's been a pattern of arguments, and my intuition is telling me that these aren't going to get better, and they're over major issues that are not going to change. It's not like, oh, we had one argument over directions one day. Like, these are fundamental things we're arguing about, or he treats me or she treats me in a way that I don't find respectful. Then you plan. And you also just don't walk out, because there's some planning involved. Like, if you don't live together, then there are fewer things to plan. But I've been in relationships before where we did not live together. We were both physicians, and we had this big board exam coming up. Am I going to break up with him the day before the board exam? No. And I even remember, and, this is something that's questionable. I will say, I waited a few weeks knowing I wanted to break up, but I knew it was for his better good to wait through the exam, because I didn't think anybody should be going into a 3-day medical exam right after a breakup. He wasn't thrilled. He's like, why did you wait? And I'm thinking, it seems bad now, but the alternative is you having maybe done poorly on a $1,000 exam, So take the other person's situation into consideration, because when you do the breakup, if you do it willy-nilly and there is something like that coming up, or if you live together and you walk out and then they've got finances all askew, you're going to make an enemy. And nobody's goal in life is to make more enemies, right? We'd rather have amicable breakups than not. So even if you don't have like financial entanglements or whatever, it's best to strategically plan the breakup so that there are as few bridges burned as possible.
I like that. I agree. I think, always take the high road and don't burn your bridges if you can help it. I mean, you can't predict somebody's response, but if you take precaution, at least you've done your share.
Exactly.
All right, so let's talk about the fears, because that is the topic of today's talk. And so we have a breakup, and why is confronting your fears the most critical stage?
Well, it's probably what keeps people from doing the breakup. So essentially, to be able to enact a breakup, you have to confront these fears. And I see a lot of people that stay in relationships because they have not confronted and overcome these fears. And so step one, in the strategic quitting process, step one is figuring out, okay, there's something I need to quit. Step two is figuring out exactly what it is. And by the way, if your relationship has problems, it may not be that the whole relationship needs to be quit. It may be one aspect of it. Like maybe the schedule that you guys have for going out is too strenuous for one person or not enough for the other person. Like there may just be small quits or changes that you can make that will make a big difference. But if you've decided the whole relationship needs to go, then a lot of people get stuck in stage 3, which is overcoming the fears. So that's why it's crucial to identify what fears may be keeping you from breaking up when you know it has to happen.
So can you go over stage 1 and 2? You spoke so quickly, I kind of missed those.
Absolutely. Sorry. Stage 1, deciding whether or not there's something that needs to be quit. This is where you're checking in with your intuition, and it applies to relationships, jobs, mindsets, the Peace Corps, your jazz band, like a type of diet, anything you might need to quit. This is just where you're checking with your intuition. Okay, something is out of alignment here. What is it? And then in step 2, it's when you've generally narrowed it down to, okay, I think it's my job. I think it's my relationship. Then in step 2, you whittle down to like, okay, if it's a job, is it the entire job that needs to go, or I just don't like my specific duties at work and I should move to a different department, or I don't like the commute and I can work from home. And with a relationship, if the only thing you fight about is who's going to vacuum, hire a house cleaner. Like good relationships are hard to find. If the only thing bothering you is the cleaning schedule, then quit the cleaning schedule, get a housekeeper, keep the relationship. But that's what step 2 is, deciding what exactly needs to go. And, if it's just quitting the cleaning, then there probably aren't a lot of fears to overcome. If it is that the whole relationship needs to go, then you move on to step 3, which is overcoming the more esoteric, internal, mind-based fears, which are like, what about the time I've invested in this relationship, or what are people going to think if I quit? Step 4 is preparing the logistics. Like if you are leaving a relationship where you live together or are married, then there are a lot of logistics to prepare. Like where are you going to live? How are you going to have, the finances all in order? And then the 5th step is enacting the quit in the way like we were talking about before that preserves relationships as best as possible.
Okay. So let's get to the fears. So we have these mind-based fears, like the time you invested, and what about finances and all that stuff. And I know people who are paralyzed in that stage. And I have a friend who's married probably close to 40 years and despises her husband, really, literally, like so much contempt. And every time I speak to her, I'm like, what is stopping you from leaving? Because like she planned this whole year to be away from her husband. Oh, I have this great plan for my birthday. I'm going to go to this country, and then I'm going to go to California for that thing. And I'm like, you're running away. Just freaking leave this guy. So, there's financial stuff. There's all kinds of stuff that it's like, wow, what you can't even see it because you're so close to it. But So how do people go on overcoming their fears?
Step 1 is to identify what their fears are. Like if your friend has the money to jet set around the world, maybe finances are not her fear. That it may be something else. It may be the fear of being alone. It may be the fear of, my partner is a prestigious person and people are going to think I'm crazy if I leave. Or, I have a friend who lives in an Arab country, and in his country, like divorce is just such a societal no-no. And that's all just about what other people think. And that's, frankly, my favorite probably to tackle, one of my favorites, because what other people think of you has generally zero bearing on your life. If somebody is miserable in a relationship, they are the ones suffering all day long. What other people think about their relationship is not what's causing their suffering. It's their being in it. So what other people think about them leaving is not going to cause them any suffering. So they gossip. Does that actually impact their lives at all? No. Generally not at all. There's some family business or some big lawsuit or I don't know, whatever it is. Like most of us are not living these dynasty type lives where that's actually going to affect our outcome. So it's just the first step is to figure out what those fears are, because there's 1,000 different ways to combat them, but they're each specific to what fear they're having.
Right. So you identify them, then you tackle each one. Right. I mean, I remember years ago I was coaching before I became a dating coach. I was more of a general life coach, and I coached a man who had lost his job. He was laid off, and his wife was still working for the company. And it was devastating for him because he thought this was it for life. So now what? And one of his biggest fears was, I'll be homeless. And so we went there. So then what will happen if you lose all your money? Then what will happen? Then what will happen? And then he just started laughing. He's like, I'm never going to be homeless. I can't do that. That's not in my DNA. Because he was starting his own business, which he ended up doing successfully, but he had to overcome all these fears, which were irrational. They were just fears. And you bring up a good point. What you just described is something that Tim Ferriss calls fear setting in his book Tools of Titans, and that's a great way to tackle. Generally I say, like before, okay, the answer to overcoming your fear is specific to the fear, but you're right. The fear setting practice can kind of go throughout whatever the fear is, and it's essentially just what's the worst outcome. How likely is that outcome to happen, which is probably where your client was like, not likely at all. But if that does happen, then how would I prepare for that? And then when you go into whatever the breakup is, you have a plan for the absolute worst possible outcome, which, in your client's situation, okay, if somehow I lose all of my money and I do become homeless, okay, then I call this friend and I couch surf with them for a while. Like, have some plan which takes away the fear of the unknown, because a lot of these fall into fear of the unknown. Unknown if there's going to be a better partner out there, unknown what your friends or family are thinking about your quit, unknown how your finances are going to be if you're splitting a household. But the fear setting process can help tackle that and make it seem less formidable. So true. And people don't realize, like, just getting to that next step can create that safety net that you need to take those scary steps, because it is a degree of risk. We can't predict all the steps, but we can know that if this happens, we can do this. And I know that, like, in my divorce, one of my biggest fears is my kids are going to be completely a mess. The impact of divorce is hard on kids. And so I prepared so well for that aspect and put them as my priority after my divorce. I did not date. I was starting a new business. I bought a house. I had a lot of stressors, but they knew that the conversation was going to keep happening. Whenever they had a question, I was there for them. They were my priority. And it paid off. They're great kids. They have incredible EQ. They're pretty balanced, and I think better off after the divorce than they were in the marriage. So for a lot of people, they don't realize that your kids can actually benefit from being in healthy households than in a household that's not healthy.
Absolutely. I had a podcast guest on, and the story that he told was about how he recently called and thanked his parents for getting a divorce, because it showed him at an early age how to strategically quit and the courage that it takes, but also how beneficial it can be, because both of his parents ended up marrying people that were way better suited for him. They both pulled themselves, like his dad had become very poor after the breakup, and he got to watch his dad build himself back up. Like, it showed him these incredible life lessons, and he thanked them for, because what you said is that it is no better to model a terrible marriage to your kids for the 18 years they're under your roof. That is not doing them a service whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how I grew up, with my parents staying married until the last one of us was out of the house. And I remember when I was 16 when I came to my mom and I said, why are you still married to Dad? Like, you guys can't stand each other. And it's really hard living in this house with the two of you fighting all the time. And my mother looked at me like I had two heads. And so when I got divorced, she said, well, how would you have felt if your 16-year-old daughter had come to you saying that? I said, I would have listened to her. I was smart. Yeah. I was telling you something smart. You didn't listen to me for another 10 years. 12 years. Yeah. So it takes its toll, but people think they're doing the right thing. And so quitting is hard for a lot of people because they think of all the effects it's going to have on other people. They're not prepared. So I think, but a lot of people do quit relationships unnecessarily. And this is something that I have really been upset with because I see as soon as the going gets tough, it's like, I'm out. And I think there's a natural stage in relationships where you start seeing each other's flaws and you start seeing the issues that come up because you're no longer in that honeymoon stage where everything is fantastic and wonderful and their poop smells like flowers and,
Yeah.
So do you have any advice for people who are like ready to bolt when it's not the right time?
Are you suggesting, you're saying when it's not the right time to bolt or not the right time to be in a relationship? I'm guessing not the right time to bolt.
No, not the right time to bolt. Like you're in a relationship and like you were saying before, like, it's not so easy to find the right person.
Yeah. Well, two things, because right time, we're putting a judgment on their choice, right? And maybe they don't want to be in a long-term relationship like that. Maybe that they just kind of defaulted, fell into one, and the second that they got an easy out, they took it because that's not what they want. Like not everybody wants a long-term married partner thing. Many do, a whole lot do, but if that isn't your goal, then it's not for us to say if you should or shouldn't stay in these relationships. Maybe you should or shouldn't lead the other person on to think that you do want a long-term relationship, but that's a whole other discussion. But I would say that if you're in the relationship, what you're describing is essentially giving up, and that's what I was describing before. It got a little hard, you give up. But I have been in this same situation very distinctly. About 6 years ago, I remember I was in a relationship. It got to like past the 3 or 4 month part, and it lost all of its luster, and I started getting really irritable. And I asked every person I know, is this just because we've like left the honeymoon phase? And it just continued to get worse for me. I got irritable. Then I got back pain, and then I would get irritable like with him to the point where he was having, like he was getting sad because I was always irritable. So like this was a terrible situation, but I kept staying. And by the way, like maybe I lasted 5-6 months at the most. But I stayed because I thought like, I'm supposed to give it a try past this. Okay, it's not the honeymoon anymore. No, sometimes the honeymoon wears off, and you shouldn't. I am a professional quitter, as I said, so I can't even fathom an instance where there's a should. I mean, everyone's a should on everybody else. Like, there's no should stay in a relationship. Like, if it's not, don't give up. Don't walk out after one fight if you don't want to. Like there's no societal need for people to be coupled up. Yes, people like that. But if you're the kind of person that's giving up after one fight and then you come crying like, why can't I find any good people? Then yes, maybe you should stop doing that and stay for longer. But I think if you're giving up that easily, you might have been looking for an out, or you're not meant to be in a relationship. Because I think most people that realize the value of their relationship and the value of their partner and they value that relationship because it's what they want in life wouldn't walk away so quickly.
Yeah, so you bring up a good point because the 4-month mark is where most people feel like, should I stay or should I go? But if you're forcing yourself to stay because you think you're supposed to just get through this period and it's a should, and you were experiencing actual bodily pain, then that's a pretty good sign. And I think that most people just have a pattern of, they don't stay past any conflict. I think in the right relationship, when you work through conflict, you deepen a relationship, and in the wrong relationship, you can't work it out. It's just really a mismatch.
Yeah, and I think that the situation I was describing, there wasn't even conflict. There was only conflict because I was making it, because I was unhappy. It had nothing. It wasn't like, times got hard. Times got hard internally for me, and maybe that's a distinction. If you are creating conflict to try to get out of this thing, that's a whole different telltale sign about maybe you need to quit, compared to a conflict arises and you guys don't deal with it well and you bolt. Like those are two different things. There was no conflict without me creating it. And that was the irritability I was talking about, is like my body cannot handle when I'm in the wrong situation. It will like randomly get dramatic or irritable. And like the second I see that, I'm like, that's not me. Something is wrong.
I totally get it. I get to a point also where I can't live with myself if I stay. There's just no way. And I know it.
Yeah.
I know it because I'm also extremely in touch with my intuition. But I stayed for 23 years in a marriage that wasn't working well. And I thought, I have 4 kids. I have to stay. So I was fighting it. Yeah, it took a big toll. And so I don't do that anymore. So as a final, as we come to the end here, this is such an important topic, and I think that people really will benefit from really knowing how to trust their body, trust when it's time to quit, and overcome the fear of quitting, because quitting has its benefits, because something else is on the other side of it. And so I think, change can be really scary for people. But to me, it's always been the gift of change, is that something that you maybe didn't even expect waiting for you on the other side. So if you can leave our audience with one final message about how to go on their last first date, or what are the benefits of quitting, or whatever you'd like to leave us with, I would love to hear.
I would say if you're in a relationship that isn't working for you, like you just said, you staying in that relationship is costing you the opportunity to go on that last first date. You cannot, there are not unlimited things we can do with our time and unlimited relationships we can be having at the same time. There's a finite amount of time and energy that you have. And if you're in the wrong situation, free yourself so that the right opportunity can come along.
I love that. Free yourself, everybody. Thank you so much. So if you can tell everybody, Lynn Marie, how to find you and how to order your book, that would be great.
Absolutely. You can go to quittingbydesign.com. From there you can access my podcast. It's called Quit Happens. You can also grab my book, Quitting by Design. And if you're on social media, I am Quitting by Design on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube.
Awesome. And you should have me on your show, because I'm a really good quitter.
Awesome.
I'll put all this in the show notes, Lynn Marie. And thanks, everybody, for listening today. And if you love our show, please rate and review it over at iTunes. It helps more people find us. So thanks again, and I hope you all go on your last first date very soon. Have a great one.